Welcome to the Past Life Awakening Institute podcast. I'm Mark Beal, a past life regression therapist and trainer. If you're interested in having personal sessions or certification training in any of these modalities, go to my pastlifeawakeninginstitute.com website for details. So thanks for watching and enjoy this episode. Welcome back, Victoria, podcast 2.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today.
Yeah, good to see you again. So this is Victoria Amador. She's in West Palm Beach, Florida, and she does sessions online as well. So she's practicing QHHT, which is an in-person modality, BQH, past life regression. And I've known her as a graduate of my very advanced spirit releasement therapy training course with the Past Life Awakening Institute. So you can find her at the Soul Healing Tribe, and she's also created the Awakening the Healer Within program, which has its own website, which is awakeningthehealerwithintrainingprogram.com. In the last podcast, we talked about spirit releasement therapy. We talked about earthbound spirits, dark force entities. But today, the key is going to be to talk about her other website and her other approach, which is Awakening the Healer Within training program. And so that is a 1-year quantum healing-based program to heal traumas, activate DNA codes, and tap into your full potential. So I wanted to talk about like what it is first, and then we'll have the switch to where it came from, which is pretty fascinating as well. So it's ET channeled by Arcturians, and but we'll get into that. But for now, I'll just preface a little bit. So I notice there's 8 quantum healing sessions spread out over time. So they integrate things. You start off, you've got a womb regression session for general healing. So is that kind of also, to beginning of this life? Do you also get into some, if needed, some of this life healing issues as a kind of a regression?
Yeah. So normally, it depends on the person, because every session is customized depending on what the person needs. And as you know, the higher self is the one in charge. So we only put some discretion there for the person to understand potentially what they could be working on.
Yeah.
But in reality, the higher self is the one that says, this is what they need to see. And sometimes that happens all the time, where the higher self is just doing what they need because this is what the person needs. So the womb regression most of the time tends to be for those that have a lot of issues with mother issues. Most of the times the mother.
Okay.
So going through the womb to start experiencing life and that connection, and then going back, sometimes the higher self will take them back to the mother when the mother was younger and going through similar traumas or whatever traumas they were going through, so that they can understand the other side, the mother, or if it's the father, and they're getting the other perspective and understanding it's not because of me, it's because of them. So it's a beautiful healing session. Like I said, most of the people that go through the womb regression is because they have a lot of issues with, most of the time, with the mother.
It's actually interesting. They say in meditation, you haven't meditated if you haven't wept. And that was actually one of my first experiences. I was on a 10-day meditation retreat. This one, they had teachings, and the guy teaching it is a very idiosyncratic style. And he was a fantastic Tibetan genius, but I was like not really catching it. I'm just going to go and sit in the forest tonight and have my own meditation, in which I recalled my parents, but their journey, and just basically relive their lives from being my parent, being adults that I knew, to my young parents, to being adolescents, to being a little boy and a girl, and just seeing them both as like innocent little children. And they grew up and met each other, and they got married, and then they fought and got divorced and broke everyone's heart. But they were just such sweet, innocent little people. And you go and you see the little boy that I was, and the traumas we went through their divorces, and but just the compassion of just seeing that all that as a group system, and seeing all of the just like really seeing. So it's interesting you're saying she's your mother, but yes, she's also a little girl. She's a powerful figure who dominates your early life, but she's also a person just going through all of her stuff as well. and to
Absolutely.
separate out them, you know, they're my parents, I'm a child, they're, you know, they're the authorities, they're the adults. Well, that's a limited way of sealing it, you know, and we can get really stuck in this identity of I'm a child and she's my mother.
Right.
She, you know, she's a little girl in a lot of ways too, and we're all just souls. And so,
But it's hard to see that when you're going through so much
oh, sure,
hurt, right?
it's impossible,
So,
and that's part of the problem.
right.
But to see that, you know, that you know, an extended version of reality is pretty healing in itself. Yeah, is that the kind of thing you find?
Right. So when people go through that process, it's almost like they're opening their eyes for the first time, because it's the first time that they see the mother or the parents as people that are hurt and
Yeah,
that went through a lot of traumas. And
exactly.
it's no longer my mother did this because she hates me or she doesn't care for me, she doesn't love me. So
Yeah,
it changes the perspective of the person, so that now we can talk at a more transcending way of, you know,
exactly.
just
So
mother who wants to
yeah,
hurt.
exactly. It's not my mother hurt me. It's you know, she was hurt. They hurt each other. You know, everybody hurt everybody, and nobody wanted to. You know, we're here because they fell in love, and then, you know, traumatic stuff happened. And some of that happens naturally to people as well. You know, a lot of issues with mothers get fixed when people become mothers.
Right.
Right? And so then you're forced to stop being the girl, and like you become the mother yourself, and people become a lot more understanding of their mother and parenting when they have to do it themselves and find out they're not quite perfect either.
Right.
And that's something, but that's something that never happens to some people if they don't have children, and it's something that can happen very slowly. You know, like maybe, you know, if you maybe they'll figure that out in 10 years, but if you can have a session, they can figure that out now and carry that wisdom that you might get when you're 35, and you can get it, you know, younger. That's great. And oftentimes, you know, being that mother doesn't solve it completely, and to really do that is so important. So, and that's also part another. Do you have like any between lives kind of a thing in that program? Is that something
Yeah,
that?
there is. Well, it happens naturally sometimes where people go in between lives to, you know, communicate and get deeper answers and see what happens while they're training at another place and time and talking to the elders and so on. So, but it also depends very much so on what the session is about, because we have the 8 different sessions. Each session comes with a, you know, every person is going to come with a different thing. Depending on what the person is needed, they might automatically go into that, and I'll take them through that process.
Yeah, great. And that's part of, you know, that's what happens before the womb regression. You know, you're born into the mother and you see the mother and all of those, you know, she's my mother. But between lives, it's like I'm choosing to be born to that person. That's what happened just before we all agreed that was a good idea, and then trauma happens. So it doesn't
Right.
mean, and so it's something that
But you know,
there's an intention behind it, like you say, to figure
right.
some stuff out.
But what I find, Mark, is that sometimes when the person goes to that point when they're choosing, they're neglecting the information. I don't believe this. I wouldn't choose. So we have to go little by little to get them to the point where I chose this. Well, yeah, you saw that in the first session, perhaps, and it's only on the third session that you're really believing that you chose this.
Exactly. Yeah. Step by step. Yeah. You can't just tell somebody that at the beginning and have them take that on and go, oh, that's okay then. No, you're absolutely right. It doesn't work like that. It is definitely step by step. And it's an indirect implication that you chose that mother. I also would not jump in and say, you chose it. So like, absolutely not. You're exactly right. That's why you've got these space start sessions. And that's one thing I, connect with the program that you've got. We've been talking before quite a lot about, spirit releasement therapy, but, what I do tend to practice, and ideally you take people through a journey where they do hypnotherapy on this life, and then past life regression. So even if someone says, I want to do past life regression, I understand my past life. I'm like, well, do you really understand your this life? Because most people don't. Do you really understand who your mother is? You probably don't. My mother is some, person who hurt me. No, she's not. She's a person who was hurt, and everybody hurts everybody. And just understanding really a bit more sophistication, who you are in this life. And even some of those things, like, why am I getting triggered as a healer on this or that? And that's where it's interesting, and it could be, I had some sort of abuse or, some sort of thing that I connect with. So past life regression is another one of those things that lets you extend this perception. My mother isn't, some powerful figure who abused her power and hurt me. She is, this life we can see it, but it can also be in this life she's my mother. In the past life, I was her mother. And guess what? I wasn't the perfect parent, and she's got some gripes with me. And so that's one, past lives can really balance things out in another way. It's also, I'm a daughter, she's the mother. Well, if I have a child, I become the mother, and I lose some of this clinging to this, I'm a hurt child, which a lot of people, as an identity, they cling to it, or they kind of enjoy it in some way, or it becomes part of their identity. By going to past lives, we can see, oh, I'm not just a pain daughter. I was a mother, and I was a husband, and I was a man, and I was a ET, and I was all of these things. So it really expands people's vision of, what they think their self is, and away from, and so do you find that as well as past life regression, something that comes up in your Awaken the Healing Within training program?
I will say it's very high percentage, because naturally we go. Let me give you an example. The quantum healing session, the person comes in, we spend a few hours speaking about their life from childhood to now, and that could take 2-3 hours, sometimes even more. Then we go into the regression session, where we actually want to take them to the beginning of where the trauma occurs that they're dealing with, that they're bringing forward for the session. And then eventually, most likely, a lot of people are going to end up in a past life to see it from a different perspective, to understand how that is carrying over for this life now, and how it became the same problem at the soul level. And then when the person is going and transitioning from that life, depending on what they're working on, we might take them to the afterlife, right? Talking to the elders and so on. Sometimes they go into the bardo realm, where we are actually talking to, different spirits and stuff like that, and spirit guides. And eventually, after a couple of past lives, or however long the between lives took, we might end up in talking to the what we call the SC, the subconscious, or the higher self. That could take another hour or so. And then after that, we speak about what they saw, what they experienced, anything that I noticed that they, I need to pass on to them, and they give me their ahas and so on. So in one session, there is so much happening, because first, the person is releasing a lot of the traumas just by talking to it. Sometimes a lot of these people, they have been in therapy for 10 years, and they have never said to their therapist, I was sexually abused, I was molested, I was physically hurt, I was homeless, I was this. So it's the first time, a lot of the time, where they're giving a life summary of who they are. And by definition, they just really release a lot of the issues. So when we get into the session, the trance session, the hypnosis part, they're automatically going immediately to the higher self is giving them where they need to go. Is it a childhood? Most of the time is a quick childhood situation, going through the womb, and then ending up in past lives. So past lives tends to be very common for us.
Okay. Can you give some specific examples of, why someone would come and take that long program? A client example you've got of what drew them to it, and the outcomes they got?
One thing that I want to make as a disclaimer is, a lot of people think the Awakening the Healer Within is just about tapping into the supernatural abilities. And I used to even think that myself, to be honest, when I received the name and everything. And then they were like, no, it's about healing. I'm like, what? So we have to heal ourselves, right? Before we can tap into anything and start those activations, the DNA activation. So this person came because she wanted to be a healer. But the number of issues that this person had were so many that it took over 5 sessions just to get to the point where she was actually tapping into true abilities. This woman, obviously I'm not going to say her name, she's over 30, I think 32, 33, I don't remember. And she was dealing with a lot of confusion, feeling always in the way of people, dealing with mother issues and father issues, family issues, because she doesn't really talk to her siblings either. She has been homeless several times, and in general, the whole package was dense, sexual abuse, and so many other things. So in the first session, we deal with the things that she wants to deal with, but the higher self takes her to the Arcturians, and the Arcturians are showing her that she's not alone, that she is so much more than what she really thinks she is in this reality. And that was a very important session for her before we got to the other real work, because she had never felt like she belongs in a family unit. She has been homeless, her mother has been neglectful, her father has been neglectful. Nobody really has paid attention to this beautiful soul. So the Arcturians basically give her a tour of the family in the other side, and the work that she's doing, why she was chosen for this mission, why she needs to overcome these issues, why she needs to go through the process of healing, because it's about her loving herself regardless of who loves her, and regardless of all the neglect and all of that. In the second session, she goes into a life where she saw herself as half of amphibian, half mermaid, and she's a singer, so she's learning the power of the word and why her singing can help others heal, and why the things that she says to herself are going to create her reality. It sounds simple, but for her to experience all of that was very impactful, because it was one of those first time where she's thinking, I have control over my destiny. I can create what I want. And for someone that has been so neglected and never felt like she belongs anywhere, this was a very important session for her. It was on the third session that we actually started dealing with the deep family traumas of neglect and so on. She was feeling unworthy. Like when people would walk towards her, she would move out of the way because she felt like she was in the way. Feeling dirty because her mother will always say, you're dirty, you don't clean, you don't do this. And she had like this thing where she was becoming one of those people that are, I forgot the name, but they're always want to be super clean and they might wash the same thing 20 times because that came from the mother. So in this session, in the third session, she goes into childhood around 4 or 5 years old. She's 4 years old. She's having a birthday. Before the birthday, she sees when the stepfather, because the mother was not with the father, the stepfather is physically hurting the mother, and she's confused. This is where the confusion came from. This is the first time that she's actually really confused and doesn't understand why the father is hitting the mother. And the little one says, she's trying to call the police at this age, but she couldn't reach the phone. Back then they had, those phones in the middle of the wall, and she's trying to reach the phone with her little fingers, but she couldn't. So eventually the stepfather leaves, and she's wiping the tears out of the mother and wondering if she did something wrong, and that's why her mother is hurt. So we take her back to see it again so that she could see that she didn't do something wrong, that this has nothing to do with her. And then in the next moment, she goes into around 5 years old when she's having a birthday, and she's outside playing with her cousins and the stepfather and the mother. The stepfather calls her, but he calls her like she did something wrong, and she's not visible to him. So she's wondering, what did I do wrong that he's calling me with this tone? And the stepfather says, go into your room, and the room is dark. And they said, don't turn on the lights, because they wanted to surprise her for the birthday party. But the way they went about it was really wrong. So she created this idea that she had done something wrong. So that was the second major confusion that she experienced. And since then, it has been confusion after confusion, where she couldn't think clearly because she didn't know how to behave, how people are going to respond to whatever she does. So she tries not to do much, not to create any chaos. In one of those sessions, she goes into a life where she sees her mother, and she sees her mother asking for a daughter. when she was around 5 years old. And from the, let's call it the sky, from the sky, she sees that the little child is asking for a mother. And that's when she decides to make the contract to come and be her daughter. But she also sees how the mother goes through the ages, and she's going through a lot of neglect. She's going through a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse. Eventually she marries, she finds the partner, the father, and the family of the father doesn't want her because she's not good enough for the father. So they try to buy her by saying, you know, if you have an abortion, we will give you this and we will give you that. So she sees all of that she didn't really, she heard stories but never experienced what it felt to be her mother. And she got to experience that. And she also goes into a life where she's seen that her father, around 1 year old, is trying to drown her in the bathtub. When the father is trying to drown her in the bathtub, the grandmother knew kind of something was wrong. So she heard that the child wasn't crying anymore, and she runs to the bathroom and sees the father with the head, pushing the head down. And she realizes that that's where the blockage comes in the throat, because every time that she's around her father or talking to her father, she feels there is something off. And she had no idea that this ever happened. This is the first time that she's seen that. The Arcturians, she's Arcturian, the Arcturians come to heal all of these things, and eventually the block in the throat is removed, basically, and she starts speaking as Lemurian, beautiful language and all of that. But the most powerful part of the healing is that she's now able to speak to her mother and speak to her father, and she not expecting their love, but knowing that they had their own traumas, and she doesn't have to be triggered anymore. Those triggers are removed to the point where she could decide to stay in a relationship if she wanted to, but not because she has to. And she's not expecting the nice things to come from them. So she doesn't have those triggers. She has grown so much over the course of just those 5 sessions that it really is mind-blowing. She has a couple of more sessions to go.
Wow, that's amazing. So yeah, some very deep stuff that, you know, it's amazing people don't know about it, and to be able to heal that before being a healer is you know, vitally important. So that's great work. And you mentioned a couple of times there that the Arcturians. So this is what I wanted to come to next, which is like, where did the inspiration for this program that you've created come from? And on your website, you say this program was designed and requested by light beings, specifically the Arcturians. And when the vision of this course occurred, they allowed you to see other beings that are also part of the group council. And they call themselves the Intergalactic Healers. And so the design of this program is 100% channeled before, therefore the schedule, lectures, discussion themes, and everything is to be done will be done as requested by the Intergalactic Healers Council members. So that's how you say it on the website, and fascinating. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I was taking time off from the restaurant. I've been channeling. The first time that I started seeing I used to call them aliens, because I'm like, later is when I'm like, oh, they're light beings.
Yeah.
I used to call them aliens.
Yeah.
First interactions I remember was 2-3 years after I went through my first set of beautiful initiations, and they came to tell me, you know, everything you're doing is not real. And I was like, what? So it was very disturbing.
Wow.
And I'm like, you know, it took me off track.
Yeah.
So I was like, what do you know? And then I started that dialogue. Who are you? Why are you coming? So and so. And what they were telling me, which is something that maybe I don't think a lot of people are ready to know or understand, maybe because I wasn't ready, is that what they were telling me is that most of the spirits that we work with are light beings, are
Yeah.
light beings.
Can I, can I, can I add, like, what did they mean? Like, what were you doing that wasn't real?
Well, the mysteries that we work with in 21 division, they're mysteries. They're cosmic life force of the wind, the water, whatever, right? But the way that I was seeing it is what they were clarifying for me that wasn't real. I had to see it from a different point of view instead of believing everything that I was hearing from whoever, because when you're looking for information and you're receiving so much, you might go a little too far. And I think that was their warning to me.
Okay.
It was mostly about understanding that the power behind the mysteries come from what they do within this planet, but a lot of those spirits, a lot of those entities are also obviously coming from other constellation and so on. So and I took them seriously because I always wonder, am I making this up? So I think that's why they came with a message to call my attention. And it started back then, but when I started channeling the Arcturians, I think it was 2019 that if I had to give it a year, I don't remember. It's been a few years, and they will come with very specific information about things that I needed to work on or things that I needed to know to better understand something that I was dealing with. So last year when I took the time off is when they asked me to do this. And I didn't want to because I knew it was going to be a time commitment and I didn't know if I was going to go back and start the restaurant again. So they asked me to do it. I put it on hold. I'm like, I'm not dealing with that. I cannot commit myself to that. Obviously you have free will. You can decide not to do it or do something that anyone asks you. So then I took them a little seriously when they started showing me what will happen to the people that will come for the program. And that's when it clicked with me, like, oh, so you mean it's actually something important that it would be nice for me to experience, to see how other people's go through their healing process. And that's when I started taking them a little more serious about the program specifically, because they specifically requested a full year, which is a very long time. A lot of people want things quickly. And, as a business person, I know that. So my hesitation was about the time frame. A lot of people say that they're ready to heal, but they're not ready to commit to a full year. And they want the abilities tomorrow. They spend 30 years or 40 years or 50 years. Some of my clients are 60 years and they want the abilities tomorrow, but for 60 years, I didn't have anything. So yeah.
Yep, that makes sense. What was your first contact? Did you reach out to them in meditation? Was it like Dolores, where it just popped into your head out of nowhere? How did you?
No. I was having a dream and I woke up and I'm seeing this entity and I'm communicating with this entity and, felt very familiar. Like I wasn't afraid of anything. And the entity is just telling me, you have it wrong, like this is what you need to do. And she wrote a few pages of things. I don't have those pages. I don't know where they are. But she wrote for me. I fell asleep. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm going back to bed. And that was my first contact.
Okay, and how did it progress? I mean, it's interesting actually. You said, when you were 33, I sort of I started taking it seriously what my elder said, and she's now 95. So I guess, do you see these guys as kind of like disembodied elders who've stepped in for this next phase?
Yeah. They have so much wisdom and like their energy and I think that's why I have been a little more serious today, because I can feel it, like no matter how much I want to be fun and nice and smiling, it just feels like serious.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I understand. And that's how they feel to me, like very serious, very like pure love, but no a lot of emotions. Like they have mastered their emotions, so they don't have to, I don't know how to explain it. Like they're just masters at what they do. So, I didn't know. They told me, okay, you this is who you are, and they even gave me information from my uncle. And my uncle is like, oh my God, that makes sense to me. So, this is an old guy, and he's like, yes, I am Arcturian.
So how would you define what Arcturians are? There are a few things on the internet here and there, but how would you define? There are some qualities you mentioned there. Are there any other definitions or any other specific knowledge that they gave you about themselves, or they're more interested in giving you teachings and the things to help therapies?
Yeah, it's mostly, I don't really ask about show me where you are or anything like that. Sometimes they have taken me, allow me to see some of those things, but not because I am asking. They mostly are available for the sessions that I do to call for assistance. And sometimes when the person is doing their session and they're like, my higher self is not communicate, I cannot merge, I cannot, then I call on the Arcturians, and I know they will do what they need to do.
Okay.
That's my little trick.
Okay, nice. So 2000, so you didn't like read about them and seek them out?
No.
They just came to you kind of in a dream while you were sleeping, some automatic writing. They don't really get into too much about, oh, we're from this constellation, and do they even mention any of their missions about like what's their purpose in like seeking you out and why you're chosen and what they're trying to do on Earth, why they're getting involved with us?
Yeah, well, what I understand for what I have learned from them is, number one, that's why even when I was going through my first dark night, I was going through the Akashic records and all of that because I had access to that. That's what they explained. It didn't happen by coincidence. It was, pretty well detailed that you have access because you're one of them. And they will explain that throughout the evolution of the planet, they had sort of like a unit that came here from Arcturus that started the seeding process. There was something that happened that created there is a fluid on the earth, like an energetic fluid on the earth that created, there was something that hit the planet that created a fluid on the earth that created the ability for people to be easily seduced by things that they shouldn't do. And that didn't happen because of them. That happened because there was an interference from outside. One of the things.
What kind of outside interference was that? Is that some other ETs or
negative entities?
Okay.
ETs that created the interference that remain around the planet, and that's why people are easily seduced to do things that they shouldn't be doing, because originally that wasn't the case.
Sure. Did they mention a name or a designation for those?
No, I think that they I'm a little hesitant to say because I don't want people to think all of them are the same.
Yeah.
But what they indicated is that there was an alien reptilian race that created this disturbance. That doesn't mean all the reptilians are bad people, are bad beings.
Yeah.
I just want that to be clear.
Okay, but that is something that was spoken. Like, had you read about that prior, or you just that's just what they told you? Okay, yeah.
I did learn about it later.
Yeah.
Like I was like, is this true? Can I find evidence of this? Because a lot of the things that are communicated, I honestly don't know about it. Like I don't go looking for that information. So later I might find something that confirms the information,
Yeah, interesting. I don't go down too much of this as well. I find that a lot of getting to the real, so I'm slightly hesitant. You're hesitant to reply. I'm hesitant to ask you, partly because a lot of the real specifics can be a bit of a wormhole, that you can go down into and get really tangled up in the details. I think the interesting thing is, they've just said, look, what you're doing you're ready for the next phase. You can start doing it this way. We're going to give you the outline and the structure of the program that you should take people over, and it's 1 year. I think that's great and very wise thing to do. But as you mentioned, like there are a lot of entities around there. And so this is just one thing. So I'll just have a little rant or a talk just to preface this. So even for people, like maybe if you're a hypnotherapist listening to this and like, well, past life regression therapy is about as weird as I want to get. No, we're talking about aliens. Like, come on, this is crazy. And so if you're a hypnotherapist or a past life therapist, you will meet sooner or later, probably, if you've got any inclination or karmic thing to connect with it, people who have ET experiences. So I'll just give just a little list of the kind of experiences that I have as a therapist, and that I'd expect my students or people that watch this channel and do this spiritual regression, this is the kind of thing that will happen. So in terms of ETs, the first thing is, if you do past life regression, you can regress people and they will be on other planets. They'll straight up be ETs themselves. And so that's the first level of ETs, is like you were one, but or you had a past life on another planet. And then you can get into details of what that planet was and the names and whoever. But it's often you can then get advice. For example, it becomes then like a between lives regression. So, for example, in one of these times, they didn't regress to a planet; they actually regressed to being on a ship, and they're on that, and they're on this ship, and they were saying, "We're choosing," and so the person was just about to leave being an alien or an ET and be incarnated on Earth, and so and they made a decision, like one of us has to incarnate on Earth, and it's you, and that person volunteered, just like this whole I'm volunteering to, to be this, go to that mother, even though she's going to traumatize me. Guess what? Everyone gets a bit traumatized. And so these ones as well, and so it becomes a bit like a between lives regression session, and so our clients can actually be ETs. And then the other time that I find ETs is that I tend, a lot of what we talked about in the last podcast was earthbound spirits and dark force entities that are attached to clients. So in that context, where there's one, there's many. There's one EB, there's some other EBs probably. And then there's those EBs, if they're harder to get rid of, they've got DFEs attached to them. And then while I'm going through doing attachment for people that are presenting issues of I've got attachments that are affecting me, one of those attachments can be an ET. And those ETs can be people with positive intentions, like the Catholic priest, but those intentions are now unskillful, forgotten, clouded, not necessary, so you can release them. There can be information, but they've got a positive intention. There can be information gatherers that have got a neutral thing. So you can find ET devices that are there monitoring. Do they still need, a lot of those projects, those experiments ended millennia ago, but they never told the ET technician, and you can just take it off. And then sometimes you can have ETs that are disrupting and that have a negative influence. So we've talked about two types of ETs, one that are really helping, Arcturians, and some that are not, some form of reptilian. And they might not even, they also may be non-emotional. They're harmful, but they're not really trying to harm. They just don't care either way. And if you're hurting the person, they just don't care. And sometimes they can even have negative influences. But remember, all of this is in the context of me being really a person who only wants to do therapy and has got people who've started coming to release earthbounds and DFEs. And then ETs happen to be there, and as a sort of a third thing. So this is very different from somebody who is doesn't have any presenting problems in terms of attachments, and then starts meditating and gets an ET coming through. So the kind of ETs that I deal with are really, as a therapist, really to help people with problems. And the kind of ETs about channeling them when there's nothing going on, I just want to get some information, that's not my wheelhouse. It's not something I do, but it's something a lot of people do and get a lot of benefit from. So I know ETs are a bigger thing in the QHHT community, and but not so much in the past life regression community. But there are people that get really interested in it. But for me, it's a side project. I'd always come back to the therapy that I'm doing. But I think it's really interesting for people to see people like Victoria, who have gone through the traditions of Dominican Republic and been initiated, and they can see that there are difficulties that can arise by doing those kind of practices, but they know how to get out of them. And so one metaphor for me is that, if you get involved in the occult, if you get involved in channeling ETs, it's very safe for some people, and it's dangerous for others.
I agree.
And my metaphor is like, if you've got a motorcycle, if you're a skillful, well-trained motorcyclist who knows when to ride and how to ride, motorcycles aren't particularly dangerous. If you're a naive person with no training who's 18 and you've got a crotch rocket, they're extremely dangerous. You should not be on them.
Absolutely.
Even my dad came to visit me in India, and I've got a motorcycle that I know how to. I've ridden motorcycles my whole life, and I know those streets. He hadn't ridden a motorcycle for 20 years, and he didn't know what he was doing. Super dangerous. And then he tried to follow me and do what I did. I'm like, do not do that. Just because I did it doesn't mean you can. But if someone is skilled, then they can follow me. If they're not, they really shouldn't. And so how does that metaphor and some of those distinctions sit with you? What do you think?
No, I agree. I think a lot of people navigate very dark waters without knowing. And that's why it took me time to go through some of these things, because I didn't want to rush into anything. I might be very spiritual, but I have common sense. So,
Yeah.
making sure that we're spiritually mature to go into some of these things is crucial, because a lot of the time people might be channeling something that they don't even know, and they think, oh, it's of the light, and they don't realize what they're doing.
Yeah. And a lot of people seek things out because it's interesting, or they're curious, or they read about it on the internet. What I love here is you never sought them out, and you never read all this stuff on the internet or a book. It all happened to you. They reached out to you. And then, just like what we're saying, even with books, like you meditate and then you read the book and you understand it. Not you read the book and then tell people what you've understood, which is not much, but without experiencing it. And so I think that there's some really key distinctions. So as fascinating and as amazing as this stuff is, I just noticed Victoria's story. She's not doing it because she thinks it's super cool and interesting and she wants to be special. She's doing it because they came at her and like insulted her slightly, or said, hey, we're going to take you to this new thing and you don't know what it, and so they really chose the time. So if it finds you cool, if you're really stretching to find it, maybe don't, maybe be patient. Maybe if it's going to come, it'll come. If not, why? What are you really looking for?
Right. That's one of the main things that they have indicated in most of the sessions. Patience is key.
I love it. Patience and persistence is that's what, for particularly spirit releasement therapy, it's a big keep. So that's great. So tell us a bit more about the method of channeling you do. Is that, we talked about meditation before and your inner wisdom? Is that something that now you're in a regular contact with them?
I did, while I was channeling information for the Awakening the Healer within the video programs, the things that they wanted me to address, very specific things. They will give me the concepts and some information, and then they will say, okay, now look for this. So that's what I did. But once I finish with that program, it's not something that I do every day. It has to be something that there is a message, I need to get a message, or very intentional. It's not an everyday thing where I just want to communicate today. And, to me, it's a little more sacred than just channeling because I want to feel like I can do it.
Yeah.
It's more about receiving the information that I need for whatever I need. And when I have a client that is coming with very interesting situations, sometimes I see that before they come, and it's like, oh, that's what that was about. But it's not because I'm so, like, I don't know, I'm not so hungry for whatever. There is so much. There is
Yeah.
so much information.
Yeah.
Like, when does it end? One time they showed me the beginning of the earth creation of one of the cycles and one of the timelines, and I'm like, how many timelines? I don't care anymore. Like, it is what it is.
I'm pretty much the same. That's funny. And I think people that get into it, and I do work with people that do channeling, and some of it is fine and some of it they're really causing themselves problems. And I just like look at what's your motivation, intention. And this is where you have to be like really kind of brutally honest with yourself. If you're a bit lonely, don't get into channeling.
Right.
Like if there's an emptiness or a neediness in you, even if there's an excessive curiosity and going down the wormhole, wanting to know everything, I think this attitude of there's so much information and I sort of, don't really care to go too much into it is good.
Well,
Or is
I wasn't like
protective.
that always. There was a period where I was like, I want as much as information as I can. And
Yeah.
then I was like, it's never going to end. So I need to take a chill pill.
Well, that's a good point. And I can sit here as a, 25-year veteran of this kind of stuff, but, that's a great point. As in our younger days, and for people on the path, they're naturally not going to listen to that and will out of, have this great need to learn as much as they can, and that's fine. But it is a little bit like, make sure, make sure you're not too bold or too naive. So the benefits of youth is you have that real quest, hunger for knowledge, and you want to know everything about everything right now, straight away, and that's great. But don't let the naivety get you into get you into waters that are beyond your ability, or that are not necessary. And I think there's a lot of self-protective mechanisms, but if people really push through, they can get into trickier waters. So is that something you notice, and is that something you actually coach people through? Were they, they're wanting to awaken the healer within, and like you said, they're really wanting to, acquire powers like straight away, and then you have to because it's like, I want to know everything versus wisdom. And wisdom is knowing that you don't know everything and that you couldn't possibly, and that the quest for infinite knowledge is not ultimately wise. So is that something that you have to work through with people, or?
Yeah, a lot of the time, like I said, a lot of people think that the program is just about awakening those abilities, and then I have to take them step by step. This is why if we are rushing through the process, what will happen is that I'll give you an example. The second spiritual practice that I cannot mention the name is a secret society. It's a secret ancestral magical society lineage, and you have to be so advanced that not everybody can make it, because you have to be advanced. If I wanted to do that before, I was welcome, but I didn't feel I was ready. It would have been a disaster, because I was going to get things that I shouldn't be playing with. It's like playing with fire when you're 3 years old.
Yeah.
So I do find that a lot of the people that come that want to be part of the program, sometimes I have to say no, because they're too far gone to the point where they're just so obsessive about abilities and this and that. And they want to know, they want to be in every single spiritual practice out there, and they don't understand that it's actually, it can prevent some healing to happen, because they're all over the place. I have some people that are doing so many different programs and they want to be part of this too. And I'm like, it's just not going to work, because you have to have the time to work through your traumas. And if you have 20 things going on, where are you going to find the time to work through that? Where are you going to find the time to sit down and reflect and contemplate about the things that you need to in order to get ready for your sessions?
Yeah.
So
that's great. Yeah. I resonate that with that completely. And that reminds me of one thing the Buddha said, which was he was in the forest and he picked up a handful of leaves, and he said, "This is how much I've told you. And all the other leaves in this entire forest is what I do know but haven't told you."
Yeah,
and like, you don't need to know. And another part of that is people would go to the Buddha and they'd ask him questions. How many dimensions are there? Are there ETs? And why are we here? Is there a God? And the Buddha created a list of, I can't remember how many it was, a long list of questions that you should not ask, that are pointless questions that have no real answer, or the answer would be, it'll take you 1,000,000 years to answer them.
right.
And you just don't need to know. The real answer is, you're suffering. You've been shot by this poison arrow of your misperceptions, your desires, and unknowing. We've got to take that out and heal it. And the rest of it is really just getting in your way. And that's exactly what you've said in a way as well. And to me, that's very wise. So for trying to fulfill people's, quest for knowledge about, and answer questions that don't need, that the best answer to a lot of questions is you don't need to be asking that question.
Yeah, one of the things that in a trance session, the Arcturians show me this wave like this, and in the center, they put my younger Arcturian self in it. And they said, this is when you find that everything else doesn't matter, when you're writing this middle poem. Then they show me the part where, as a younger Arcturian, I think it was 7th dimension, and somehow it moved to a higher dimension. And then it was like, now what? So then I had to start all over again and get to that middle point. And I was like, oh my God, so it doesn't end ever. Yeah. And I think that's when I got my chill pill. Take a chill pill.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, so that process does have to happen. So, but yeah, so say that again. Was that you when you were younger Arcturian? Does that mean they told you, or you regressed to remembering having been incarnated as an Arcturian in the past?
They regressed me to a point where I was actually in a 7th dimension body.
Yep.
Through the process of evolution, I went into a higher dimension. And then as a higher dimension being, I was making decisions that were very, very, important. And then at that point, I remember feeling the feeling of, now what? Like this was what I wanted. Now what? Like, that's what I wanted to experience. And now when I got to experience that, it's like, now what? And then they took me back to that. It looked like a DNA strand, but it was very wavy. And in the center, they put the light body of me, and they said, this is where you find peace. And since then, it's been like, okay, I'm good. Okay. I don't need to know everything anymore.
And so are you saying that you had been an Arcturian in the past? Yeah. Okay, right. Yeah. So, and is that something, did you ask them, like, I'm Victoria in 2019, why are you connecting me? I'm trying to have a nap. And did they then also tell you, like, we're connecting to you for this reason, you've got a mission, you agreed to be part of this, you'd set this as an intention when you were one of us, and now we're connecting to you. So, do they give you some of that explanation?
So there wasn't such a long explanation. There was a very little explanation. And it was like, I know who these beings are. It was very familiar.
Right.
They were teaching me things that I needed to learn to take it a step further, what I was already working on. Yeah. Because when they started coming, I was already very advanced with removing entities, doing work that was very advanced for someone that was only in it for 7 years, right? And I was asking myself, where is this coming from in regards to what do I do with this? Like, I have businesses, I was contemplating life, like, do I go full time? Do I stay? And I was contemplating a lot of things. So they started coming so that I could see them, because in the dreams I will have a lot of experiences. But it was in 2019 when I started seeing them more with my eyes, like, being able to have that interaction. So it was a process of getting to the point where they wanted me to be a physical being here, bringing in their energy to work with people that are ready to receive their energy, which is why a lot of my clients will receive the assistance from the Arcturians, even though they're not necessarily Arcturians. A lot of people that come may be from Maya, Pleiadians, whatever. And if for whatever reason, the higher self says it's okay to bring in the Arcturians, we bring in the Arcturians, and they will work with them to do whatever they need to do, because they have a very high technology. I have seen the technology and I have received help from their technology. And when I mean very powerful technology, it's like mind-blowing.
Right. Well, that's actually my next question. Do you find that some of your Awakening the Healer Within program clients, they've been born in past lives as ETs?
Yeah, well, obviously, most of them have had ET lives. Yeah, like, sure, we can count how many.
Okay.
Only one session.
Do you find any of them have spirit attach? Well, how many of them have spirit attachments as a percentage, would you say?
For the Awakening the Healer program,
Yeah.
it's not extremely high compared to
Yeah.
like I think,
because you said 70% for your normal clients before, and
yeah,
that's my feeling. These ones would be less. Is that?
it is less, but I will say a percentage of them do have attachment. I'll give you an example. I have a new person in the program. She's on her third session. In the second session, we started dealing with SRT.
Okay.
And in the third session, we had to do another SRT session before her quantum healing session.
And are these earthbounds and dark forces?
Both.
Okay. Now, do you get many ET attachments, like devices or any ET attachments that they preferably shouldn't be there? Do you find that much?
We do find quite a few attachments.
Yeah.
But this is the thing.
Yeah.
A lot of those attachments are not there. I'll give you an example. A lot of those attachments are there because at one point the person needed to be monitored to make sure that the person will go and do what it needs to do. And those attachments will create. I have someone, he is, my goodness, this guy is amazing. He's coming into his spirituality now in this physical body now, but he's wow. And he had an attachment in the back because they were worried. His assignment was so big that they had to put an implant there to make sure that they would always knew where he was in case he needed their assistance. So they said he doesn't need it anymore. He's finally got it.
Yeah.
So they removed the implant. He hasn't had any back discomfort, like he work out and feel the back problem. And that was coming from the implant. I had another person that had an implant in the eyes, and she will even see like a red cone and things. And it was because she needed to be monitored all the time. They said, no, we're not going to take it out yet because she still doesn't get it. She still is not there yet. But then I have other implants that were there for not the highest good of the person that needed to be removed.
Yeah. So in the work that I do, which is, I acknowledge very much that it's a subjective experience, and I'm really a therapist who helps people with earthbound spirits, dark forces, past lives. Hence, almost all of the ET devices that I see, just like all the other things, can be removed. No hesitation in removing every single. There's no excuse for an earthbound spirit. They can all be removed. DFEs, every single one can be removed, and that's sort of the basis I bring. Hence, when I see ET attachments, 99% of them can and should be removed, but I can understand if you're not doing DFE, EB releasement work, you could be working with people doing hypnosis sessions, finding an ET attachment, and it's okay. But it's really my subjective background that means most of the time it isn't. And it's either because there can be some DFE influence that's my wheelhouse and not somebody else's, and then they have attachments there and they can influence the ETs. But the other part is what you're saying is that there was an attachment that did make sense, but now it doesn't. Hence, you can remove it. And so I find that, it's not malicious. It was there for a good reason, but it doesn't mean it just has to stay there. And what you're saying, like back pain, eye vision, they're impairing people in this life in the moment. And there's a therapeutic resolution you can do, which is let's release it. And the idea that, maybe 99% is too much, but it can happen. Put it this way, I have seen some instances, whether it's a few people who've got devices where they really want to have it on them, and everyone agrees that it's an okay idea and that it's not having a detrimental effect. But my feeling is, in like the QHHT world, that kind of thing, they'll see 90% they're positive and only 10%, they're sort of not needed anymore, they're obsolete. But for me, it's really most of the time they're not, but occasionally it's sort of okay to be on it. So that's one little thing people would say to me from QHHT. Why are you going around releasing these ET devices? They're good. I'm like, well, it's a little bit, some of the time maybe, but most of the time not. But that's also my perspective. Because if you're doing a QHHT session, you're not doing it, with the presenting issue that they've brought you of spirit release. Which is so the setup that I have and the setup they have is completely different. Hence, the statistics and the things they find will be completely different. They're 90% one way, I'm 90% the other way. But you can see why. So it doesn't. There's no real conflict there. There's no real disagreement. It's just the setup. Does that make sense? What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times the implants may be there from the ETs to do. So, I had a client. She really thought the ETs were like, oh my God, they're there to hurt me. And then she goes into the session and sees, and they take her to a room, they show her what they did and everything. And she's like, oh my God, they saved my life, because they had to upgrade her DNA, because when she was born, the doctors gave her medicine that was causing issues with her DNA. And they had to take her when she was a child and do work to replace that medicine that was in her, that changed her DNA. So they gave her different DNA structure, but she was traumatized because she thought they're going to kill me. I'm in a surgery room. Yeah. Then she gets to see it from a different perspective, and she sees, oh my God, these people are actually here to help me, and they're part of my cosmic family and so on. But sometimes those ETs are not there to help you. I had a client where he ended up in a planet that was very dark, it was extremely to the point. This guy doesn't believe in ETs. He doesn't believe in spirits. He did the session because he was dealing with business challenges. And he was so surprised when he ended up in this planet where he saw part of himself as an alien being, a tiny little alien being, like 4 feet tall, with a lot of other, but they didn't have any emotions. They were giving energy to a big machine, and his soul was taken. So the soul of this person is taken. When he sees all of this, he starts freaking out. He's like, I don't believe this, but it's happening. And he's going through all the emotions that you can think of. His body's vibrating at 100 speed. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? A version of his higher self from the future comes to tell him it's okay, because if you unplug this machine, all of these people in this planet are going to die, but it's not you who's going to die. And he had to go through the process of understanding that to agree to unplug from this machine. And he's like, I cannot believe this made such a big deal in this physical body here now. But it happens.
Yeah, that's great. Interesting points there. The people recalling being on an ET operating table and going freaking out a little bit. That's come up in my sessions. And I think that's probably fairly common.
Yeah.
But, and so that's the kind of thing where also people might have a past life fragment and, oh, I'm getting killed. And it's like, oh, I've got to come out of this. And they sort of freak out. But and this is what we can do. We can regress people and say, okay, you're on the operating table. Someone's doing this. What happens next? And what are they saying? And what are they thinking? And then you build up that situation. You gather the narrative and you realize, oh, it's all fine. So and so that's one powerful reason for regression.
I think if anything, I think from this session, I think for those people that are into any of the secret or the occult, a spiritual practice, or anything that is out of their comfort zone, to make sure that they take the time to grow spiritually before they walk through those doors. These are very beautiful, like the information and the wisdom that we get from them is to the next level. But not everyone has to go through initiations to believe in something or start meditating and getting what they need from it. It's only some people that are supposed to walk through those doors are supposed to be those ones that are really wanting to practice and practice for others. Before it was certain people were picked out of the tribes. Now everybody wants to be in the tribe. And so I think being more responsible is key, you know, being patient, and we can have everything we need if we meditate. We don't have to, you know, I'm not here to advertise 21 divisions or IFA or anything else. You know, my biggest advertising is meditate. That is my biggest advertising.
Oh, that's
Always.
great. That's great. I was going to ask you answered a question I was just about to ask. You know, what are your messages to people that want to be healing and or healers? I think that's really wise. Really help. Yeah, meditate. That's great. If you're on this healing path, you know, just do what you need to do each day, follow your life purpose, and before you know it, you'll be there. But also know that there is a price to be paid, and a cost and a dedication and spiritual. I mean, spirituality is a spiritual discipline.
Absolutely.
And disciplines, you know, disciple comes from discipline. So, and being a disciple of this, it's really a lot of, it's not like the freedom to know everything. There's a lot of discipline that you have to follow. And a lot of people, if you really realize how much discipline was involved, maybe you wouldn't want to know everything about it, you know?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, take the time, because you have to dedicate time every single day. I have to go into a process of meditation and doing other things every single day to be responsible. So if you go, you know, people have a problem and they want to jump into one of the spiritual practices because that's going to solve the problem. And some people are being told, if you do this, you can save your marriage. If you do this, you can attract a man. If you do this, you can have a wife. If you do this, you can have the money. And we have so many people going to many different spiritual practices to fix problems, but they don't realize they haven't really fixed the problem. They just created another one. Because they're just adding more to the pile. That's my message.
Yeah, and that's great. If you're interested in working with Victoria, I really recommend. I mean, she's an incredibly talented healer who really gets results and has really dedicated so much of her life and past lives to this. And so you can find her at the Soul Healing Tribe. I really recommend her for individual sessions, and also really recommend, this is why I wanted to have this other podcast, really, just so that people know about her Awakening the Healer Within training program. Go and check out the testimonials and videos she's got from people who've done it. It's amazing and a great blessing. If you're lucky enough to hear Victoria's words and to connect with her, you know, it's a blessing for you. So yeah, so thank you so much, Victoria, for blessing us with your time. Thank you so much for all the work that you do and all the great things you've done over many lives in this lives. You're so cool.
That was funny. Thank you.
The links to all of her socials and websites will be in the description box. So yeah, so thank you very much, Victoria.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening or watching. To find out more about my guest, see the links in the description for details. If you're interested in having personal sessions or certification training in hypnosis or hypnotherapy, or regression to this life, past lives, between lives, or spirit releasement therapy, then visit my website, thepastlifeawakeninginstitute.com, for details. Thanks so much for watching or listening, and see you next time.